I'm recording.
I'm drinking. We're drinking canned margaritas, y'all. Life is good.
I counted to 3 in my head.
I didn't count to 3, which is very unprofessional. Y'all, we're all in the same space.
Yeah,
Yes.
recording in the same
This
room for
episode
the first
is
time.
actually being brought to you from my basement.
What kind of basement, Jack?
Well, we don't call it the murder basement anymore.
We all know deep down.
Under the carefully cleaned
When
surfaces.
I moved into this house
You hung up all
from
these
the
black curtains
19th
to hide the
century,
bodies.
this basement was flooded, and through meticulous bucket hauling before I got the idea of putting a sump pump down here, we found so many skeletons of squirrels. Yes, obviously. But eventually we got it dry and patched up, and I put a floor down, and what better use of a murder basement than to make it our podcasting studio.
No, truly. It's cozy. It's intensely quiet.
The ghosts of the squirrels are quite docile tonight. It's quite roomy down here, really. I've got fairy lights set up.
Also, I want to quibble with your definition of the 19th century a little bit.
This house is from the 1800s.
1898,
Oh,
right?
you're going to be a 19th century purist over here?
I just feel like when you say it, the mind gravitates towards the middle.
1801 or something. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
For grading on a curve, it might as well be the 1900s.
It's a D minus
most
in 19th
houses
century.
in America. Whatever. D minus is passing.
Barely.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Paw.
Behind the paw, we're keeping it. I love it.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
love
it's
it.
cemented.
Can someone besides me explain what that means?
Oh my God. Well, it was Mafo's idea, I think.
Was it?
To name it that way.
No, I think it was
okay.
Jack.
Jack's idea. Look,
Is it really?
it's group chemistry. This is us trying something a little bit new. So for us, the experience of making the show is a few notches different from what the experience of listening to the show must be like, because we love making the audio dramas. We all love doing our writing. We all love brainstorming ideas together. All of that stuff comes through. But I think for us, a lot of why we continue to do this is not because of the ounces of gold that come cascading in. It's much more like we really love making things, and we love making things with our friends, and we all have kind of a common struggle around how do you fit creative pursuits into life. And those topics kind of continually come back to mind and are particularly relevant given a series that we just did and the wild circumstances around it. If you want, Mafo, feel free to tell us about some stuff that's going on in your life.
Yes, I had a kid. I got a baby. She is 3.5 months old.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
No, thank you. It has been quite an experience to try to do all the things that we do while also have baby.
It challenges the grammar. It challenges everything.
You gotta start.
You just
meeting
gotta
them
cut certain
halfway
things out.
And meet what the baby can say, and you start saying gotta have baby.
I love too, as simply as you put that, which I'm sure is just the thud of how it feels to some extent. You have so much else happening. I mean, everybody knows you. If people listen to the talk surrounding the episodes, that you've been living in Spain for a while.
Yes.
The fact that you are in our basement in the United States right now is a big deal.
It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah. It's good to be back, y'all.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. And your baby's adorable.
She is.
It's pretty great. Whether she's looking delighted or looking freaked out, which are her two expressions that I've learned so far, she's adorable either way.
Yeah. And we will share a snake's paw baby.
We'll do a snake's
Post.
paw babies.
Babies edition.
This is so funny because we joked about that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Having an episode where we just do a Muppet Babies, but with snake's paw babies. Those are my hounds upstairs who they just started hearing the ghosts, I guess.
Yes, Jack has babies too. So to the theme of how you manage to do it, we have generally published an episode monthly-ish because that's
Hard-ish.
the pace we can sustain. Yeah, capital ISH-ish. Whereas you just wrote Medium, and if anybody's hearing this who hasn't listened to Medium already, this is a 3-part series that Mafo wrote in its entirety, and not the longest thing we've done by any means, but like a real solid amount of writing, something that I imagine took a terrible lot of reflection, and it's just been finished. So anybody who wants to go check that out before you hear some of the behind the scenes stuff, go look a little back in the feed and you'll find the 3 episodes of Medium. But like, I mean, I wish I had a more specific question than this. But how?
So, well, it helps that I managed to finish a rough draft before she was born. So I think writing, especially in the first couple months when we were in Spain and we were alone and we were raising a newborn without really any assistance, I don't know if writing would have gotten done at that point. I did manage to do some revisions. That is easier to do. And it's often when she was like sleeping in my lap and stuff like that. So you just kind of work when it is possible to work. And I had the benefit of I wasn't working another job except doing Snake's Paw stuff while I was in Spain and a little bit of other audio editing. But aside from that, I had a lot of free time.
I like if I can just ruin it with a summary there that like the best advice comes down to like, you just prepare ahead of time. And like a lot of people right now are like, what?
Well, truly. And like,
I'm going to do that part.
Part of the why this feels appropriate to all have on mic is because we have heard that a lot of people who listen are also fighting the same fights that we are, like looking to make writing or whatever creative work a bigger part of their lives. And it's sad, but it's true that a lot of times the answer is, well, you're building on work that you already did. Like you got good at it or competent at it, whatever, before the big heavy stuff came along. And thank goodness you're not having to just like learn from scratch on the spot, because it would be a terrible lot to ask.
If I can pose a question while also making this all about me for a second. In terms of a lot of people who are like, what advice do you have for a new writer? I tell them, like, you know, I did not hit it big with my first thing. My books were like not the first books I wrote. And Mafo, you are the first person I know who actually finished a book. And I remember when you finished it, I made you a t-shirt that said, ask me about my novel, and we had a little party for it and everything.
Yeah.
And Andrew, I remember way back in the day when we were just like kids and you sharing some of the stuff that you wrote and me thinking at the time, like, well, I guess I'll never be a writer because this is really good.
Goodness.
So I've already lost what my question there is, but like...
I think you just have to do it a lot. You have to,
I guess,
and do it persistently.
Yeah.
And I think that's especially true in terms of, like, it helps to get started young, to be interested and to pursue it in your free time. Because the older you get, the less free time you're going to tend to have. So to already have some kind of routine or some kind of consistency about writing and about putting stuff out, once you already have that in place, it's easier to kind of fit it into the obstacles that come your way. If you're trying to dodge those obstacles and build that routine at the same time, I think it's a much more difficult task.
Yeah. A lot of what makes it a little less crazy making for me is that we get to talk about the stuff as we're doing it. Mm-hmm. And I compare it with like one of the other things that I do, which is I do odd bits of film and television, and you know, it's a weird routine. Like you go on to a set and most people who work there do it almost every day, whereas a lot of people who are part-time actors do it a few days a year, and everybody's in their groove, and all of a sudden you just have to pretend to be in a groove and try to stay out of everybody's way. And auditioning is super strange. And I realize like one of the reasons why that stuff is as strange to me as it is I don't talk to a lot of other people who do that. Like I'm not close with a lot of other actors. Whereas the fact that in the very solitary work that is writing, one, we often brainstorm together and we often kind of give each other a second opinion in the kind and gentle and understanding ways that we've learned to over the years. But also we just get to talk about like, I keep finding myself doing this. Does that make sense? Does this happen to you? And that I don't know, that makes all the difference in the world for me.
Yeah,
for
sure.
Having a community is... I don't know where I would be without it, essentially.
Yeah.
I would like to ask a few questions a little bit more specific towards Medium.
Okay.
Just to jump into a very specific question. The topic seems to be, in lack of a better word, it's topical, I think. And also it's very serious because we see a lot of people right now who are worried about what the industries are going to look like, actors, writers, and musicians. And what I really zoned in on was how you fit humor into this, because these scenes are not, I think by design probably, they're not consistent in tone, because some of them are very serious because they have to be, because it's a discussion of death. And then you have some scenes that like you want to laugh at all of a sudden. How did you go about blending the humor with the not humorous?
That's a very good question because I don't know.
Thank you.
So I would say, for one thing, this has a very similar format to Clone of My Own.
Mm-hmm.
Clone of My Own was very funny.
Yes.
And it was meant to be that was the goal with Clone of My Own. And with this one, I wanted to follow a similar format. And it was inspired, I should say, by someone who submitted a story for our Kaidan that we ended up not having last year.
And that was Sal the Psychic Guy.
Sal the Psychic Guy.
Sal the Psychic Guy, thank you.
And so he submitted something called Dial the Dead. That one was more as like actually dialing the dead was kind of the implication or one way to interpret it. And then I'm not sure how exactly the leap to AI went. I was just thinking, how could this be like a feasible business?
Well, and the kind of, I don't know, worldwide significance of generative AI was so sudden. And it was after that, if I'm remembering the timeline.
This is another one of those weird things where, if I can tell like a quick story, one of our earliest basic pitches we ever did was Andrew pitched this beautiful story about like a person who through dark science managed to reach into other parallel universes and find other versions of himself. And at one point we had this person actually fell in love with another universe's version of themselves. And then maybe like a month later, between us editing it and posting it, Loki season 1 dropped, and it was like so many of the plot points and I was so mad.
So never
our
even
show,
thought about that. Wow.
We frequently have ideas where it's like, oh, this is going to be great, and maybe we're tapped into the zeitgeist, and then suddenly someone will beat us to it.
We are tapped into the zeitgeist, but we're just too tapped into the zeitgeist.
And we don't produce quite fast
the echo
enough.
of the zeitgeist, that's...
Yeah.
And like you said, you wrote the outline for this months ago, back when this stuff still kind of felt so far off that we didn't need to worry about it, and now we're suddenly in this very scary time for... what is this technology going to mean? And it's beautiful to think that like maybe we can use it for good. And I think your story does kind of pose the option or the possibility that maybe it can do good, but also with a warning.
Yeah.
I'm putting words in your mouth.
No,
I'm
sure.
sorry.
And that's the thing about it. Well, to answer your first question, the humor was partly like the Dial the Dead idea that was submitted to us by Sal the Psychic Guy was like a comedy thing. So from the beginning and from it kind of growing out of the Clone of My Own format, I wanted comedy to be there. And I think for me, there's always a challenge of how can I make this funny also? Because if you listen to something about people having their loved ones died and being potentially like exploited from that vulnerability, it's like a hard listen. So to throw some levity in there, that kind of helps a bit, I think. I also just like making things funny. And one of the interesting things with Medium, there are a few scenes, like the one with the customer service rep, which is very much a throwback to Clone of My Own.
Oh, that would be Matt Stanley?
Yeah.
Beautiful comic timing on that, too. I just loved listening to him go from, like, you don't even know if he's an AI or if he's, like, some sort of woo-woo mystic, and then, like, just having to throw out, you know what a brain fart is?
So there's stuff like that. There's stuff like Randy, who's the guy from the cemetery who keeps calling about this just absurd situation that when James was recording that part, he's like, this guy is an idiot. Like, what are they doing? So you have some things that are like more like almost absurdist comedic because it's having to deal with like the bureaucracy of the businesses around death. But then you have also, it's less like comedy haha jokes, but there's sort of a banter that goes on between Riss, as the main character, and AI Gabe, who is the AI recreation of her dead husband. So there's like sort of jokes in them kind of being playful with each other. But then the humor also is somewhat unsettling there because you know it's this thing that's meant to make her feel comfortable with this thing that she's paying for and is based on the grief of losing someone.
And it's the only respect in which this is sci-fi at this point, is because like all of what's in that story is possible, except that AI is just not good enough yet to be very funny.
Yeah.
without
funny
me intending
or
to.
even very convincing.
Yeah. So to match somebody's personality, and to particularly match somebody's personality that is defined by a sense of humor. And I think that's where like the comedy feels not only just essential for like mood, but also that it's like this is about missing somebody who was a really lighthearted, irreverent presence. And this is okay for anybody who's listened to Medium already. I am going to suggest a second listen because the second time I read it, I had a realization, which is, in theory, AI Gabe is trained on a history of text messages and other text correspondence, which would mean there's a lot there in terms of his personality, but he would not have most of the shared memories that they lived. And I just thought you did such an incredible job at writing somebody who doesn't know what she's talking about most of the time, like while reminiscing, has no memory of the thing, but manages to just playfully deflect every single inquiry by just being so glib. Like, it was a fascinating second listen realization because I was like, oh, it's all in there. And I got to like admire the technique you put into
So
it every single time.
I didn't even listen to it that deep, but now I'm like, just in my head, I'm like, when he's like, oh, was he at my funeral? It's like, he wouldn't even know if that would be an appropriate question to ask. Like, that could be like, no, he lives in Antarctica, remember?
Mafo likes to keep things a bit on the subtle side, so stuff generally bears a second listen.
Yeah, that was an interesting and somewhat challenging scene to write. And I would say that probably the most challenging thing about writing Medium in general was writing AI Gabe. Because it's like, how do you write a conversation with someone who essentially has no life? They're not doing anything until you call them. They're just this generative computer thing that just spouts words in response to you. He's not going out and doing anything. He's not going to work and like, oh, how was your day? What did you do? So you can't talk about anything like that. No new things are happening to him. So the only things that they can talk about are things that happened to her, things that happened to them previously, which he doesn't know about. So he has to kind of fill in those details as they go. And then they can banter and they can
If I can throw
play
in
games or what have you.
another thing that I thought was so dark, I guess, was the other thing that he can talk about. And that is, and this is like when I heard this part of it, I was like, ew, yes, this is what AI will be used for. He also threw out advertisements for the company that created him.
Yeah.
Worked it into conversation.
So unsettling.
Yes, where he's like, by the way, Medium Technologies is going to have video calls soon. And it's like, and if you upgrade your plan for an extra $9.99, he didn't say that part, but like, that's what it felt like to me was when Alexa is just like, by the way.
Yeah. And especially the fact that that part was paired with the thing that an AI is genuinely best at. Like, what AI is sometimes better than real humans at is being curious about other people. And like, because we just suck at that because we're so preoccupied with ourselves. And what people really need to hear to like feel okay sometimes is just like, tell me all about it, how to make you feel. That sounds really hard. Like something that is not at all relating to the person doing the speaking, other than the fact that they are willing to just listen endlessly. And the fact that often like back to back with doing that very necessary service for somebody who's going through a grieving process, he is also saying like, by the way, there's lots of other people here you could talk to as well if you don't feel like you could talk to anybody else in your up their life.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it turns from so genuine where you can see the value of this thing to being so sinister because of course a company that's selling it is going to find ways to do that. You're never going to have them stay within the limits of decency.
Yeah.
Yes. Isn't that just like a great summary for businesses under this late stage capitalist dystopia we live in? They will never stay within the boundaries of decency.
Yeah. And that's actually one of this is only really implied in the story, but one of the workarounds that this AI business could have is it encourages Riss to share Medium with other people.
Yes, there's
so they
even
also
in the
join on.
background when she's on the hold.
It's like
they
you'll
put
get a
in-
bonus if you
I
someone
remember
subscribes with your
clocking in
link.
on that.
Yeah. And then it's also encouraging her to communicate with other dead people that she knows, other relatives, etc. And so the idea is it'll build like a sort of community of people who can, and like presumably these AIs can like inform each other of what the others are doing. And so it sort of builds this false sense of community by making you continue to use it. And it has sort of an addictive property.
Yeah.
to it.
I mean, after the final scene, you can imagine a next conversation with AI Gabe where he'd be like, yeah, I saw your Meemaw. She said blankety blank. And all of a sudden he does have something to say. And one of those huge handicaps is resolved.
Do you care if we do a rapid fire question round?
Yeah, do it.
Cool. I don't have any questions yet. The ending, it left it on such an ambiguous note. What was that, an intention? What do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, for me, the interesting thing about this, one of the fun things about writing it, was that the horror stems from something that is the opposite of horrific. It's just fun, pleasant conversations with people on the surface. It is behind that surface that is the horrific part. So ending it on a very sweet, almost saccharine note, but in a way that just lets you realize like where this might be going, is something I've just thought was really a compelling thing to pursue.
Okay, quick follow-up. Did you ever imagine a version of it where what happens in the end is she pulls away from it?
No. I don't think I did. Because I don't think it'd be much of a cautionary tale if she did.
That's a great question there. So this is a cautionary tale. Is that how you approached it? Is that how you...
It is. The whole time I was writing it, I wanted there to be some element of, oh, this could have value. This might be therapeutic for some people if it were used responsibly. I wanted it to feel like it could be a nice thing. Me personally, I'm sort of intrinsically opposed to the idea. So there is always that element in there that I'm not sure I could escape from that.
Take note, listeners. Authors have a point of view. No, it's like it's such an interesting kind of, I don't know, tacit question about dystopias all the time is like, do you show the dystopia winning or don't you? And conventionally, yeah, by way of cautionary tale telling, you do show the dystopia winning because otherwise you're showing like a solution to the problem and not just saying like, here's a problem that needs to be solved. Because showing a solution overshadows like the other possible solutions.
Yeah, exactly.
And how badly things could go. And you know, risks, I guess, maybe leaving a reader / listener on the place of like, well, it's all going to work out fine. But that's at all.
I think there was
It'll be fine.
throughout it, there was that running, like every time James's character called and was like, hey, you got a really big problem here. We're about to exhume a dead body and we need you to call back. And just continuously like, I'm going to delete that message. Almost showed like how much her priorities were kind of getting a little
Yeah. I was kind of circling the drain.
Circling the drain.
The one other question that occurs to me to ask to go back to the start is like, okay, so you pulled off Medium because you did most of it before you had a kid. How are you going to write the next thing?
Well, I've been editing Medium with a kid, so there's
you got
that. Yeah. Mostly I just like the fortunate thing about my daughter is that at least for the time being, she is sleeping through the night. She doesn't sleep much during the day. She's not much of a napper, but she sleeps at night. And my wife goes to bed relatively early. So if I stay up later, I can get some stuff done.
Heck yeah.
And every now and then I'll grab some time during the day if she's out with the baby or what have you.
I remember, I think this was Michael Chabon, reading about some novelist's routine. Pretty sure it was him. And he was a guy who had kids and was told by other writers, like, your career's going to be ruined. There's no way you can do both. And his writing routine was 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., 5 days a week. So everyone else was asleep. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But
Throw out something, Andrew, that you said one time many years ago that stuck with me throughout all this. You might not even remember saying this. So we all have our hobbies, I guess. And Mafo, you regularly watch old movies, and I love that. I love discussing them with you. I don't have the same cinematic experience as you two. Andrew, you garden a lot.
I do. Plants take good care of themselves and don't try to bother me while I'm working. So
There
plants
was
are my pets.
a time when you first started dabbling with video games. And I remember what you said to me was, well, you said a couple of things. First, you said, like, it gives you the illusion of progress, which is dangerous.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's always going to stick with me.
Yeah.
But the other thing was, this time has to come from somewhere. And if you've already got a schedule and you have like what you do in your days and you have this set aside and like, okay, I can start a new hobby, but this time has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And sleep is a great place to take time from, I guess.
There has time been taken from that.
To a degree.
The legal voice in the room, I'm just going to quickly say, not all hosts of The Snake's Paw endorse the statements made by Jack
I was just saying,
Townsend.
if maybe like you want to start writing and you sleep 12 hours a day and you don't know where you're going to fit it in, right?
Yeah. No, adding 4 unnecessary hours of sleep definitely qualifies as a hobby. That's
maybe
a
it
big
is like this certainly not helping Maffo. He's got it figured out. But like if someone out there was like, well, how do I find time?
Yeah, it's tough. No, you are always doing it instead of something else. And
Yes.
the flip side question for me to that one of like, where am I going to take this time from? I have always, because I love to do a lot of different things, and writing for me is a very slow, painstaking process. So it takes me a long time, and I'm always kind of kicking myself about how slowly things move. At the end of the day, I also have to be like, do I regret anything I did today? Like, do I wish I'd spent my time differently? And if the answer to that is no, if I'm happy with every single thing that I chose to spend time on, well, that's just what it takes.
That's the Con Marie approach, except instead of physical things, it's time.
Yeah.
And if it helps any to hear this, I do the same thing when I write. Like I'm kicking myself the whole time. I'm like, am I wasting my precious time? Did I just spend 2 hours working on this paragraph that I just ended up deleting? And I waste a lot of time, but it's not really a waste. It's
Just spent 30 minutes on this comma.
Sometimes you spend 30 minutes on a comma.
No, I mean, we are all fighting different versions of the same fight, the three of us here and a great many of y'all listening out there. So I guess this is just a good little solidarity moment. And I don't know, leave your favorite good writing habit tips in the comments.
Especially after what we just said, I think we need to thank everyone who spent this precious time listening to our podcast. Absolutely. You're doing instead of doing something productive.
Yeah, and productivity can go screw itself because it also life has to be fun, and we are very lucky that we get to do work
That's right.
is fun and leads to more fun like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Well, I think this was a very great first episode of Behind the
Behind
Paw.
the Paw.
We'll workshop that
Yeah,
later.
we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
We'll do a countdown next time. Those are famously effective.
Okay, we'll do it. We'll do it. Let's go.
Right now.
3, 2, 1.
Behind the
We should discuss
Count it
the
to zero.
tempo first.
I counted to
You said
zero.
zero.
I did. I don't know why. Anyway, one more time.
We're just gonna roll in with the
3,
Oh, okay.
2, 1.
This is a mess.
Hey y'all, Andrew here, not in Jack's basement, with a quick couple of follow-ups to that conversation. One, the basic pitch that Jack made reference to about someone meeting their alternate universe selves, that episode does not exist anywhere on the Snake's Paw feed. That is in fact a basic pitch we recorded and never used. We were surprised ourselves to realize it, so if that threw anyone for a loop, we were right there with you. And thing two, if you've got any comments or questions about Medium or anything else related to the show, please find us on YouTube or Instagram, or drop us a line at thesnakespaw@gmail.com. Thanks, and see you again soon.